Peoples of the worldwide federated internet. What's good? Had my audio off. So, in the last video, we were wrapping up the intro to the book of Leviticus. We kind of deal a little bit more with that here, but we start getting into the verse by verse. Hopefully, right, here we go. Back to the book of Leviticus. Do we think we're going to get into a verse by verse today, or are we still in intro mode?
May depend on reading this comment and where we go from there.
Okay, read your comment.
All right. Well, it's not my comment, of course. It's Brother Thomas's comment from the last video.
From the last video, which I haven't uploaded yet, but it's on Don's channel. I'll when I upload this video, I'll put a link to Don's channel.
And I gave you some time to do that too, but I don't know.
Yeah,
what your schedule's like.
I know I've just been working through video issues, like trying to stitch that last video.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I went in and edited various parts of it, so it'll jump around a little bit, but hopefully everybody sees that and understands it. But yeah. All right, so the comment is this. I like what Brother Darius said about we have to understand the face value first. The face value being, let me start over. I like what Brother Darius said about we have to understand the face value first. The face value or plain reading is the literal, grammatical, historical method of Scripture interpretation. In any given text we read, if there is not enough said to arrive at a conclusion, we have two options. One, to continue with the LGH hermeneutic and cross-reference using other passages that use the same language in the same context, or two, abandon the LGH hermeneutic in favor of a redemptive historic hermeneutic, where we posit a theological conclusion from another passage onto the text in question. The second option is not actually cross-referencing, but is a changing of the rules. I hear preachers, not you guys yet, doing option 2 all the time, and have even done it myself before I was aware of it. I hope you guys are able to avoid this pitfall, because reading a book like Leviticus lends itself to reading Jesus back into the text. The redemptive historic hermeneutic only works when 1, the theological conclusion imported is a correct theological conclusion, and 2, if the passages in question is actually about the theological conclusion. The temptation to make the entire book and every sacrifice about Jesus dying on the cross to save us is real, and Jesus really did die on the cross for our sins, so the theological conclusion is correct, but is it contextually what the book of Leviticus is dealing with? No. Brother Don rightly pointed out that there is more to salvation in Christianity than switching destinations from heaven to hell. And I think the book of Leviticus, as much as we want it to be about Jesus dying on the cross for our sins, is going to help us more in the area of what are we supposed to do now that we are bought and cleansed by his blood. Sorry, didn't mean to write so much. If you read all that, then God bless you.
I think that was very well said, and I think it goes back to a comment I made that was a quote of Chuck Missler. It's about life after birth. What do we do once we have now attained to this salvation? How do we live our lives once we get past that? And as I'm reading through the book of Leviticus, that's what I'm seeing. We're here, we're on the other side. What do we do now?
I think what I need to do is go and watch a couple. I've got one video I was looking at earlier just to try to see where he was going. Some videos on what these supposed hermeneutics are. I think it's getting too technical sometimes. I think some people do get too technical. He talked about pitfall of, one direction. I think there's a pitfall in this. I think misunderstanding it. For me, the grammatical historical concept of understanding the scripture is mostly about what it's saying. What it doesn't mean just what you make it up to mean, or what a father or a pope or something like that has said. This meant this, um, and bringing like new definitions of scripture. So there's a real possibility in, as I mentioned last time, of going the direction of hyper dispensationalism, and people get and say, well, the wording of this is not exactly the same as the wording over here, and they completely separate the two things: the gospel of the grace of God and then the gospel of Jesus Christ are two different phrases. Therefore, there's two different gospels there. That's nonsensical and stupid. And but there are literally people out there doing that, and people that go and say, well, the words born again only apply to Jewish people. As I mentioned, it's like, I'm shocked that people say stuff like that, but they do. And there's a fellow that went into Romans, and I think it was chapter 1, verse 16. And let me go there, because I think I want to read the verse. It may not be that verse, so let's see here. Yeah, it's probably chapter 16. And I'm gonna miss it, and then we're gonna just have to look it up or something. Verse
What's the
25
context?
of chapter 16 says, "Now to him that is of power to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery, which was kept secret from since the world began." And this guy, not going to mention his name. He's kind of faded off into the background, but he invented what he called the establishment doctrine, and he presented a hyperdispensationalist viewpoint based on that. And it leans toward the idea that the phrase Paul being an apostle, or yeah, preaching the gospel of the uncircumcision is therefore a different gospel than the gospel of the circumcision and stuff like that. That misunderstanding is, puts him into a whole different class. And it's like it's Paul, and preacher. Jesus preached a different gospel, and John preached a different gospel, and all the prophets preached a different gospel. It's all just nonsense. It's just, and I've already got stuff on YouTube going through every single verse, saying gospel, except for the fact that it says gospel 100 times, just using the word gospel. So I just mentioned those. But every place it has a caveat, gospel of the kingdom, gospel of the grace of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, etc. I, read all those verses and go through all that in a couple different videos. But yeah, but there's a real problem with that if you misunderstand that and say, well, we have to divide it up more than it really deserves. Um, because the real sense of it is something like the word church or baptism has a meaning in history, has an actual definition, and it's been abused by church leaders. So that's where they get, infant baptism or baptismal regeneration from, and stuff like this, by misapplying the scriptures instead of, looking at the context, seeing what the word actually means and stuff like that. And I'll give you another, for instance, with this tabernacle that we have. Um, it's said several different ways. It's mentioned several different ways. It's called the tent of the congregation in verse 34 of Exodus 40, but it's still the tabernacle, you know. So for somebody to come along and say we're going to look at this historically and grammatically, and then divide up those words would be nonsense. It's the basic of what I'm getting at there. Um, and yeah, it can guard against things like a strong allegorical interpretation. Although I think that still must apply because we see Paul showing us that it exists. And I don't think that Paul shows us it exists in Galatians just so we can say, yeah, that's the only place we can find it. Jesus spoke by parables, and there's obviously types in Scripture, and it's been preached for however long, types. But how far somebody carries the type, that's always the question. That's always the difficulties. But yeah, and there's another way it can go also, of course. It doesn't necessarily lead to hyperdispensationalism. Uh, I just can't think right now of exactly how I thought of it the other day. But yeah, there are other pitfalls to looking at that the wrong way, and and I need to watch something on the historical redemptive hermeneutic or something like that to try to see what they're saying about it now, because they're changing theological terms on us as well. I think it's the term free grace has been used, and if you listen to John MacArthur talk about free grace, uh, he talks about it in a negative way, but he's a Calvinist, and for so long I've sit here and read Calvinist preachers that talk about free grace, the free grace of God and the doctrines of grace and all that is all they say Calvinistic leaning at least. Um, and there's even a free grace press that is Reformed theology. So I'm like, okay, so why is John MacArthur coming out against this stuff? And apparently there's a book by, I forget who it is now. I think it's Wilbur Pickering, but I'm not 100% sure. Uh, that talks about free grace in kind of an extreme way or whatever. He talks about it kicking back against Calvinists and goes probably too far with what he's saying. And that's what John MacArthur's responding to. But now it becomes the theological term that free grace is somehow Arminian, and we're gonna battle it with sovereign grace or something like that. And it's like y'all are not. Y'all need to read 150 years ago and just figure out what people were saying back then rather than our new thing, because it just gets I don't know, it gets really miry. Uh, I think because they're trying to be more technical and specific or something, but they're saying things that don't make any sense. I'm out of touch, I guess, maybe with all that stuff.
I think to Brother Thomas's point, this is why you just stick with the Bible. When you're looking for something that is what's the word I'm looking for? I think superfluous might be the word. I might be using that incorrectly. I think I'm using that correctly. But when you're looking for something that's not there versus what you can readily see, just understand what you see and move on from there.
Hmm.
That's a I agree with him. There's a real danger in trying to make something out to be something that it's not.
Right.
Sticking with the Bible's always it's the best way to go.
Yeah, and I remember
Yeah,
Spurgeon was talking about interpretation, and he said it this way. He said, I don't have a quote for you, but he was talking about uh, the allegorical interpretation or something like that. And he says, if you're not the master John Bunyan, then you really need to steer clear of this interpretation method because you're probably going to get it wrong. He even got it wrong, but it was just interesting to hear him say it like that because we know of John Bunyan's allegories. But anyway, go ahead, brother
You were gonna
Darius.
say
You were going to
you were gonna
say,
say some, Darius?
oh no, I was just gonna say, I also agree with brother Thomas here. I believe, and as we said last week, I mean, as I said last week, that again, the Bible has a first off meaning. I also, though, with caveat that was saying that I believe that God gives us, wisdom as we continue to read over our lifetime, right? We tend to see those connections and correlations. The Spirit of God, I believe, helps us. you know, if you could imagine back in the day, when I was younger, my mom took us to the dentist one time. I think it was the dentist, and they had this big old picture up. If you stared at that picture long enough, it went from a 2D picture to a 3D picture, and you could see what was
I remember
inside.
those
It,
pictures.
it didn't change. The picture still is what it was. So you got that initial look. But if you looked at it long enough and you was able to focus the right way, you could see the underlying picture inside of the picture. And I believe that, again, just as Brother Thomas points out, there are times where there are underlying themes and thoughts. I mean, in the book of Luke, we see Jesus walks and show himself. He walks with the people on the Emmaus Road, I believe it is. I
Hmm.
can't. But and he explains to them himself, shows himself in the scriptures, throughout the scriptures. I mean, I imagine they didn't go through every, verse, book of the Bible, but I imagine in a 2 hour walk, it probably was time enough to say, look at this, look at these things. Do you understand these things? And uh, um, you know, I was I clicked on a video that last night. It was an odd video. It was a 4 lady panel. It was a 5 lady panel, and two of them were Jewish and two of them were Christians, and one was a moderator. And the Jewish lady asked, "Well, hold up, if David is supposed, I mean, if Jesus is supposed to be the son of David, then and that makes him a human person, then how could Jesus, who has no father, be if the Messiah is supposed to be the son of David, he should be human, a full human person. How could he be how could Jesus be that if he has no human father? And of course Jesus answers that question, and the young lady who answered back did not answer the way Jesus would have answered that question, which was amazing. But the point is Jesus answers it using the text to help you understand something that you want, that when you read it the first time you might not see. And I believe that goes for the scriptures here. I mean, there are things in Leviticus that clearly, again, I think the Day of Atonement. I think that the happenings there are very clearly, representative of Jesus Christ, both suffering for sin and dying for those sins out of the city gate, right? So it has this being put outside of the gate like the one goat, and then being sacrificed like the other. And I think that, again, we can see that very clearly as we look back. But there are others, like I say, as we start going through the book, you know, it, the book is just a very technical book on how to make sure you maintain purity, in this particular system. So I agree. I agree with Brother Thomas. I like I say, I tend to always like to go with the literal understanding, and then maybe play with other ideas as we go along.
Agreed.
Hmm.
Agreed.
Now, there was one other thing that I was thinking of as I was trying to get back into this is just um, the importance of the tabernacle in this, and that the tabernacle is actually already erected here before this. Um, and several things are going to point this out. But as we talked about last time, how how God was using Moses and He spoke to Moses, and and one thing that I was reading just pointed out how that was showing the necessity of a mediator between God and man,
Mm.
and and we have that example in Moses, of course, and the ultimate truth of that is we have one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And as far as the tabernacle is going, the idea that just kept reoccurring was this tabernacle is being brought in um, where it wasn't before, and and toward the end of Exodus, which is where I'm kind of at in my readings, finishing that and going into Leviticus right now. Um, it's 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 kind of a repetition happening with God speaking to Moses. I'm not sure exactly the verses because I've gone through about half of, I don't know, about maybe 7 or 8 chapters right there. Um, but anyway, with Moses talking to God, God spoke to Moses face to face, for example, and stuff like that. And if you think about in the book of Genesis, the Bible starts out with God walking with man, God speaking in the cool of the day in the garden, walking with Adam and Eve, and that was lost. And whatever exactly happened, I can see little things where God speaks to people throughout the book of Genesis, but it goes downhill. Obviously, you have the whole worldwide flood that happens, and then after that, uh, Abraham's called out of Ur of the Chaldees. There's all the idolatry that's creeping into the world. So it's all going downward. But in this and in the illustration of the tabernacle is God again meeting with man, and it talks about the cloud coming and dwelling on the tabernacle, and the glory of God abiding on the mercy seat, and the image uh, maybe maybe somebody doesn't see it this way, but I see the shining of the glory of God from the mercy seat filling the tabernacle and perhaps penetrating out uh, wherever there's some gap, if you will. Uh, and 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 I see in that the tabernacling Son of God, especially when he went up with Peter, James, and John on the mount and was transfigured before their eyes, and his glory shone, and he spoke with Moses and Elijah about his coming death on the cross, and Peter, of course, attributes that to being eyewitnesses to his second coming, the glory of his second coming, but says, we have a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you do well to take heed. This word of God that we have in our hands is even better than them seeing a vision of it and having that experience themselves. So anyway, uh, y'all go from there.
So are we ready to actually get into Leviticus?
We can get back into it, I think. Unless somebody else has something else to say.
I'm leaning on the wisdom of YouTube. So how y'all want to do this? One of y'all want to read through chapter 1 again, or do we want to just start going verse by verse? How you want to do it?
Do we have any lingering questions about chapter 1? I know there were several at the end of the first video.
Uh, uh, um, if we're gonna start from again from the book of, from chapter 1, then yeah, I think we got questions. But if not, if we move into chapter 2, then we can move on. But but if we're gonna start back in chapter 1, yeah, I don't think we covered all of the thoughts there in chapter 1.
All right. I say go ahead with that.
You
What do you got? My mind kept going. I read it again a couple times uh, in the last couple days. But verse 9 says, but his inwards and his legs shall he wash in water. So that popped back into my mind. It's like, why are they washing that, the legs of this animal and the inwards? Did you
I haven't come
investigate?
to any conclusion about that just yet.
I didn't either. I just saw it.
All right. I guess if we want, we could start off by reading the text again, since I think we did most of the introduction to the last 3 weeks. I think we should start off by reading the text again, if that's been our MO for the last other books that we have done.
Sure.
Uh, and plus, yeah, I think it'd be good. Are we just doing chapter 1 today?
Um,
I'm cool with whatever.
it
You want to
depends
move
where
from
we get
chapter
to, I
1 to
guess.
chapter 2?
Okay.
Don, you want to read chapter 1 for us
Sure.
in your eloquent voice?
And the Lord called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, If any man of you bring an offering unto the Lord, Ye shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd, and of the flock. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. And he shall put his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him. And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood round about upon the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into his pieces. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put fire upon the altar and lay the wood in order upon the fire. And the priests, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts, the head and the fat, in order upon the wood that is on the fire which is upon the altar. But his inwards and his legs shall he wash in water. And the priest shall burn all on the altar to be a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if his offering be of the flocks, namely of the sheep or of the goats, for a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring it a male without blemish, and he shall kill it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. And the priests, the Aaron's sons, shall sprinkle his blood round about upon the altar, and he shall cut it into his pieces with his head and his fat, and the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire which is upon the altar. But he shall wash the inwards and the legs with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it upon the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if the burnt sacrifice for his offering to the Lord be of fowls, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or of young pigeons. And the priest shall bring it unto the altar, and wring off his head, and burn it on the altar, and the blood thereof shall be wrung out at the side of the altar. And he shall pluck away his crop with his feathers, and cast it beside the altar on the east part, by the place of the ashes, and he shall cleave it with the wings thereof, but shall not divide it asunder. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is upon the fire. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. Is everybody still there?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
here.
I was just going to point out one more time, real quick, if I can. Here, let's see here. In my little commentary, he gets to that verse that we already pointed out. So, just briefly here. I was going to try to find it, but anyway, it says, he shall offer it of his own voluntary will. The gospel warrant is, whosoever will, let him come. There must be a willing soul. None but a soul made willing in the day of his power pays any regard to atonement. The Lord allows that all that are willing to come to the atoning provision. I'm just going to stop reading that there. But we're not the only ones that heard that, so I think it's probably universal. But anyway, yeah,
Oh, the understanding that whoever did this of their own free will. It wasn't something that was forced,
yeah,
required, but you have to come of
have
your
to be
own free
willing.
will. Yeah.
And
Which goes back to something Darius said. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm just not gonna sacrifice today. Like, nah, just you need to do this, but you have to come willingly.
mm-hmm,
So when I think about I guess all of these offerings that we're going to see in the next few chapters, or the next chapter or two, they seem to be, again, like you. I mean, I think that y'all put out so eloquently that they are these are free will offerings. it described what a burnt offering looks like, so we know what one should look like. But but these are, I mean, this burnt offering here is bought of your own free will. It wasn't because you sinned, because you did something wrong. It wasn't because of that. It was because you just wanted to sacrifice to God for whatever reasons you had in mind. And so I do think that, as we read through chapter 1, this outlines what a burnt offering looks like, for the other, like, sin offerings and things that where they have to, bring a burnt offering. But it's almost like this is a offering of thanksgiving, or an offering of praise, or an offering of just honor to God for no other reasons than God is God. And I think that's important to note, because when we look at it, for example, in, I believe, the sin offering, is almost like you saying, and I'm not trying to jump ahead, but it's almost like you saying to God, like, thank you for forgiving me. Like, you bring this offering as well with with the rest of the sin offering, because you got two different types of sacrifices going on there. But I do find that this offering I mean, this burnt offering is is indicative of somebody, doing it because they love God. The one there's only like three places in the New Testament where it talks about a burnt offering. And Mark 12:33 says it is more. It's talking about love, right? It's talking about loving God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and then loving our neighbors as ourselves. And it says these things that are more than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. So to love God in reality is more important than this outward sacrifice, to show him that, I mean, that says to the world and those who looking about that you love him. He's saying more importantly than showing this outward expression is to love him first, you know, from the heart. And this may induce the reason why they bring in these offerings too. So
So the offering is a showing of what's already going on with you internally.
I could believe that right there, Khalif. I could believe that is what this offering is, and it shows again. I mean, things that we already have said, which again, I think we're gonna repeat many times, but it's just showing like we should be thankful for how good God has been, for delivering us from our own Egypt, bringing us on our own Exodus, helping us travel across our own Red Sea. When and I think that the book opens up with these burnt offerings in that way. Um, and not to take away from the burnt offerings, but I would like to just and probably come right back to the burnt offerings if we can. But I like to point out that God is calling Moses. Does anybody else hear God calling Moses? Where's Moses when God calls? And if no one else hears, I mean, how did that work out? The other thing is if anybody hears or doesn't hear, why doesn't God just say what He has to say to the children of Israel and not to Moses? Right. So this again, we talked about this. The children of Israel at the mount that quaked and burnt and thunder and lightning, and there's like, we don't want to hear from Him. And so I wonder, I wonder what does this signify when we see that God called unto Moses and speaking him out of the tabernacle, no longer from a mountain, but from this new place, and possibly in front of the mountain. So
Yeah, I was going to
Right.
say
So
it looks
calling
like it's in front of the mountain or at the foot of the mountain,
yeah,
at least at this point, of course.
yeah,
so now calling talking to Moses from the midst of the assembly versus from a distant place. Moses being the intercessor between God and the people. And I think it's legitimate to say that that would be a type. I don't think that would be a far stretch to say that would be a type and a picture of what would do, being the intercessor between God and man.
Yeah. Now, there's an interesting thing. Since I just went through Exodus a couple times, um, and y'all tell me if you know any better about this, but when they set up the camps and they're going and traveling, right? They talk about Judah being in one place, and three. I think it's three tribes on each side of the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is in the middle of the whole of the congregation of Israel, right? And that's how they got up, and then they traveled and went, and when they encamped, they encamped in these places. Well, somewhere along in the book of Exodus, God's so angry with the children of Israel that he separates the tabernacle from them and puts them out away from the tabernacle, and it's by itself. And then a little bit later, Moses is begging forgiveness, basically, and begs for God to come back into the midst of the congregation of the children of Israel. I just found that really interesting. It's something I never saw before as I was reading, that it seems like that God stops what he was setting up and moves and says, "Y'all get out of my way. Get away from me before I destroy you. I'm going to utterly consume you because you're so rebellious." And then Moses intercedes for them, and he comes back into the midst. I think
Oh,
there's instruction there. It's just something that occurred to me this time, but I haven't thought much on it except that.
interesting, interesting.
Right.
Um,
In
some other things that were pointed out here that may be something to discuss. One thing, um, he says, perhaps this intimated, and what is he talking about? He's talking about. Mm, well, let me just read this part here. Perhaps this intimated that all these institutions about to be given bear upon the same great subject, specifically the atonement and its effects. So that's the main thing. I don't want to read a lot of it to try to get the context, but y'all can think about that. Another thing he talks about real quick is he's saying it's a whole burnt offering, as quoted, I think, by Brother Darius. No, he said all burnt offerings, but whole burnt offerings. And he doesn't give a verse for it, but I believe I remember that being somewhere. I mean, he's saying that this first chapter is all whole burnt offerings, meaning they were to all be completely consumed, right? They're not roasted and then, the sons of Aaron are, eating of it or anything. It's whole burnt offerings. Um, and he says about that, it was interesting to me. Let's see here. I want to quote him right. Um, Goodness, I have lost my place. I should underline things. Okay, here it is. The offerings first spoken of are those that are to be wholly consumed, types of complete exhaustion of wrath. And then the last thing that he speaks about is he's saying the offerings coming from the herds and the flocks. And one reason it may be saying that is because of the proximity, the ease of having an offering, meaning it's there. It's not afar off. You've got to go search in for some lion or something and go through a tremendous struggle and adventure or whatever to get this. He didn't say all that. I'm just hearing that it's right there for them and available. And then the second thing was the characteristics of these animals fit them to be convenient types of various truths relating to sacrifice. And he talks about a few other things. I don't want to taint our idea of that. Anyway, any thoughts on those things? I think we've already mentioned that really this is what we're talking about. This is the book and further is about the atonement and its effects, meaning it's about more than just, as we've already pointed out a couple times, It's not just we're going to look at the death of Christ every single time that an offering is given. There's more involved in that. Just like there's more in the Christian life than just getting saved. It's great that somebody gets saved, but they've got to go forward. They can't just stay there. And I mean,
A
it's
per
go
one
ahead.
one thing that I thought as I was reading this is a person would have to have a real legitimate desire to stay in communion with God. When you look at the principle that, yo, you're bringing this of your own free will. This is not, nobody's forcing you to do this. It's required, but this is something that you have to want. There's that what's the word I'm looking for? The nuance of the Christian walk, and obviously not trying to superimpose things here, but the nuance of the walk with God in general is that, hey, this is a requirement, but this is a requirement that you have to bring out of a willing heart. Nobody's going to twist your arm and say, bring this offering. You brought this voluntarily of your own free will. So the concept and the idea is once they get on the other side of Egypt, you have to want to stay in communion with God. It can't just be, all right, he brought us out of Egypt. Let's go do our thing now. Now we're good. No, you're still serving God on the other side of Egypt. Now there's these sacrifices and there's these things that God has put in place that you now must do. And again, just pointing out that verse 3, that's a I think that's I think verse 3 is super important to the entire rest of the book because you can easily read these sacrifices and think about going through the motions. And the person that would really do this with a pure heart isn't going through the motions. It is, yo, Lord, this is what you require. Let's do it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay in communion, which is why you see somebody like Joshua faithful all the way up until the end. This is clearly somebody that, with a pure heart, was adhering to everything going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I'm still pushing. I'm still pushing back to the first verse a little bit. I know we moving on, and I apologize.
No, no,
I
go ahead.
I also want to point out another thing in the book of Leviticus about God talking to Moses. I mean, we got about 2,000, but 24,524 words, except for the last 17 words of the book. I believe God is speaking the entirety of the book of Leviticus. It's probably one of the only books in the entire Bible where we not getting the words as they come to the prophet, so to speak. I know we still getting it that way, but we getting these are the literal words of God. This is God speaking the entire time to the children of Israel. If you look at the first four books, this is the first time that happens. This is the only time it happens in the first four books of the Bible. In a sense, we got some unknown. I mean, I know we all will say it's Moses because that's what Jesus says, but we have someone dictating to us the beginning, right? And then we have possibly that same person now helping us understand. I say first four, but first five of the books of the Bible. But then in Exodus we have someone else continuing on that story. In Leviticus now, God is the children of Israel have been delivered. They have been brought out of the land of Egypt. They are they done been under this rule of the Egyptians possibly serving their gods while being there, possibly not even serving a god at all, but just still praying out just from just historical purposes. And they get out, and the first thing they do is they start worshiping in a way that is not what God wants. And God here begins to speak. And I think we talked about this just a little bit more. I mean, a little bit before, but God speaks. And I just want to say, like, I think I said this before about a child, maybe a orphan child moving into a home with a new father. And in all the love and joy that that orphan child may have experienced to be accepted into a family, only to realize that you now a part of this family. You got to live like we live. You can no longer live like your family lived
Mm.
before you got here, but you got to live the way we live in this house. And I think that the way this book opens up with God speaking to Moses out of the tabernacle, is very important here. We got a way of living in my midst. I'm telling you, when I'm not here, man, my kids make a mess of the house. They talk back sometimes. They do what they want to do. But when I come home, the house they done start cleaning up. They almost just finishing it with their schoolwork. It just magically we got the two problems left, and I think that right here is this book opens up with that in mind, in mind that there's a way we do things here, and and let me explain to you so that you can explain to the people how we are going to move forward. When you want to, when you want to be, when you want to thank me, when you want to just praise me, when you want to just think about me, and you want to make an offering to me, this is how you make that offering. You don't do it like how you was trying to do it out in the wilderness. They're in the New Testament before, and I know Don's going to disagree with this, but before we get in the Old Testament, before we get to to Moses, there are only two other people doing burnt sacrifices that I know of, and that's Noah and Abraham. I'm the only two that I see in the entirety. In Abraham, we only really see him do it. I would say the once with Isaac, and so I you know I think that again people were making sacrifices, but we only see twice where that's actually executed by people we would call those who feared and trusted God, and I think that God has to establish the right way to thank him and praise him and glorify him. And if you are gonna make a sacrifice, and he begins that explanation in the beginning. And I believe that the book starts off with, hey, this is how these are the ways to show appreciation the right way. The book opens up. How do we praise God in a sense, in my mind? But I could be wrong there.
Now it's been a few months since I've read both Genesis and Exodus, but if my memory serves me correctly, when the children of Israel exited Egypt, weren't there Egyptian defectors that went with them?
Hmm.
Yep.
There's a mixed
So
multitude. Yep.
here's something to point out as well. You have a you have a diverse group of people, some that grew up under Hebrew heritage in Egypt, and some that grew up completely separated from Hebrew heritage in Egypt. So who knows what they did or did not do in Egypt? Maybe they did things that are just not mentioned. But let's say for the sake of argument that the Hebrews did one thing and the Egyptians didn't see these things. Let's say for sake of argument that there were some sacrifices. Probably wasn't, right? How would these people, this mixed crowd, know what exactly to do? Okay, so how do we do this? Who's the authority? What makes you the authority, Moses? Who told you this is? And then as God is speaking to him, showing these things, and then they see the results of people who don't listen. And I think I brought this up before. It's like, man, okay, we already saw what happened in Egypt when Pharaoh tried to buck the system and go against God. That didn't work out for him. And now we see Moses is saying, here's what God said. We heard that thundering. We saw the smoke on a mountain. Yeah, I'm when Moses said God said something, I'm gonna listen to him. And here's how these things are done. This is completely different from Egypt because now, as you said, now you're grafted in. Whatever you did in Egypt, whoever y'all sacrificed to, whatever it is you saw, this is a different system. You can't do that anymore. Here's how you do this. Here's how these sacrifices are carried out. That was
Yeah,
just my
and
thought.
because you see the women, when the children are born, the young male children were born, they knew that it was wrong to kill those babies, right? So they got a sense of what's right and wrong, but I don't know if they had a sense of what's worship, excuse me, and to talk about the defectors, the Egyptians that's coming out, I when my mom passed away, and I want to talk. I mean, and I was trying to study through that the text of the children of Israel. Moving on. To the Red Sea, and they got all these Egyptians with them that chose to follow, and I believe they followed for one for this one main reason. They were married to some of the Hebrew people, and I believe that not that they were following necessarily to get out because they believed that God was going to deliver these people. I'm not saying that,
Mm.
but I know the one time we see, I can't remember what book is in. I can't remember what book is in, but the one time we see where a child is stoned, guess what he is? He the mixed child of the Hebrew and the Egyptian, and so I think an important note to that point that you made, Khalif, is that whatever we bring out of the world with us, you know what I'm saying? I think if we parallel that it can be a problem for us later down the road. And that child was stoned and killed because of I want to say they couldn't either one, he had blasphemed God, or two, he was an unruly child. I couldn't remember. I can't remember what it is since I just brought up out of the blue. But the point that I'm making here is that those things in the world we should leave behind. We should not take out with us. We need to leave those things where they came from. Again, I think that's a parallel there that's important. But I agree with you, colleague. What is it that they know, and we see what they attempted to do while Moses was away from them, and we see what God response to that was, and I believe to the most part, uh, I really believe the Bible is a book that unfolds it, like one page at a time. I really believe that's what the Bible does, and so we go from a place of we have a command to not eat off the tree to now we almost don't know what to do until we get here, I believe, to Leviticus. This is the first time I think we get to a place where we know exactly what is expected of these people, and then later to us by some other way.
And again, not to hyperimpose a New Testament idea right here, but as you were speaking, I thought about what the book of Romans says: "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." And you really do have here a renewing of people's mind on what is a sacrifice. How is this done? What are the rules? Whatever you thought and whatever you saw in Egypt, yeah, we're not doing that. Here's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and not to rehash or to take too long on this too, but um, certainly, I mean, as we were talking about this earlier, uh, interpretation by grammatical and historical method would first, as we've already talked about this, it would ask the question: where did Abraham and you said who was the other one? Isaac, um,
Noah.
Noah, Noah. Okay, we'll start with Noah, and then later on
Abel.
Abraham. Where did they come up with the burnt offering if it wasn't being done before? And I think you can see it when you see Abel sacrificing the firstling of the flock with the fat thereof, which harkens toward Leviticus chapter 1, where they're talking about the fat and all that. I don't see why that wouldn't be a burnt offering. I don't understand why anyone would deny that myself. But you can certainly think about it, and the idea that it says the firstling of the flock. One, it wasn't the parents. It's a you know a newborn, if you will, the first year, which again we get into the specifics. Um, Also, in Exodus chapter 32, we find the molten calf, right? And they come out of the land of
Mm.
Egypt. They rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And certainly they were doing it wrong, but they had the idea of burnt sacrifices somewhere which again, I go back to hearing that Moses said, "We're going to offer the abomination of the Egyptians, and they will kill us if we do it in the land." So they were not sacrificing this way in Egypt. They may have been sacrificing different ways, something else. I don't know, because the Bible, as far as I read and went through it twice in the last month or so, it just I don't see anything indicating that. Um, what they were doing exactly after the children of Israel went into the land of Goshen. That is. So, um, yeah, I mean, we could talk about it more, but I think the implication is there for being able to see that there's something that was given early on, passed down, of course, corrupted, because we're going to see that this was given and it was later corrupted. Isaiah talks about how it's corrupted, even if it's just going through the motions in the book of Isaiah or something like that. So this,
Right.
we don't want this. I don't want this. I want your heart right with God. Um, and as we again, I think we talked about last week that the children of Israel are to be a peculiar people, to witness who God is to all the nations. They're to be a kingdom of priests. Is one of the phrases used in the Bible. So, not to take anything away from, because repeatedly it says Aaron's sons, the priests, Aaron's sons, in this first chapter, and the Levitical priesthood in itself, but the whole of Israel is said to be a kingdom of priests. And I think that points to, again, God saying, I'm going to show you how to do things in a really specific way to show um, my intent, God's intent, to the whole world. And um, and again, going back to a couple of weeks, a few weeks before, again, I don't know when we talked about this, but the interpretation of some that Israel is going to be reestablished and then they're going to sacrifice again, and people interpreting that that's okay because it's showing again, what these sacrifices are meant to convey to us. Although I still lean your direction, Brother Darius, that it seems to me they're doing the wrong thing. They're forgetting the sacrifice of Christ and not acknowledging it, rather than doing the thing right. Again, you'd have to go check these other people's interpretations out to see exactly what they're saying. Uh, and one day I'll get to that.
One of these days,
One of
Yeah,
these days.
yeah,
amongst your
But yeah,
many studies.
definitely the Lord speaking. And I mean, not to be any stickler, but if you go to chapter 4, um, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, and then God was speaking at least from verse 2 on, even if Moses, say, put down that first verse, as we have verses anyway. And that happens throughout the book a number of times. I don't know exactly how many. Um, but you just mentioned that maybe the last part of the thing wasn't spoken by God directly. And I just want to put that out for anybody that wanted to argue with you about it. I'm sure you
yeah.
didn't intend it that way.
Yeah.
Pre-answering a question very
Yes,
wise
pre
of you.
answering it. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know how YouTube comments get.
Yeah. Don't
sorry.
miss the forest.
Yeah. Go
I
ahead,
know.
Darius. You were ready to say?
No, no, go ahead, go ahead. No, I was I, yeah.
So is there anything else we think we want to go over in chapter 1?
Well, I thought it still was a lot of good stuff there. I thought. I mean, we already one. I noticed with, and I guess we'll cover it more. But this particular offering, of all the different types of burnt offering, has to be a male offering. Had to be a male offering. So, but when you got to the peace and trespass offering, they could be female. And I believe for the trespass offering, it only could be a female offering. So, but I guess we'll cover that a little bit more.
Interesting.
Another thing is I think I texted y'all a couple of weeks ago about this. One, you know, is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation is where so not at the tent, but at the door is where the sacrifice happens, and he puts his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, right? Who puts his hand? I thought the priest did all the killing, cutting, and stuff, but that's not the case, right? The
Right.
real case is that the sacrifice literally was done at least for the bullock. For example, I think there are three types of ways to see the sacrifice. So if it came from the herd and the flock and it was a bullock, then it was the person bringing the sacrifice. He would kill that sacrifice. He would cut that sacrifice up into the quarters that it needed to be cut up in. And only thing the priest did was take the blood and sprinkle it on the
The
or
altar.
on altar, and then burn the sacrifice. But
Right.
if you get to where it was of the flock, down a little bit further down the way, you see that if it was a sheep or a goat, you see that they were only allowed to kill it, and they wasn't allowed to cut it, and the priest had to then cut it. I believe I'm getting this all right. I'm trying to remember some of the stuff I did a couple of weeks
Let's
ago.
verse
And
12.
yeah, I got mine in the non verses version, so I
Sure.
got yeah. But yeah, in verse two, yeah, and he shall cut it into pieces. Hold up, um, let me see what I wrote.
Well, let me read it to you since I got it right here. So, verse 10 on down. And if his offering be of the flocks, namely of the sheep or of the goats, for a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring it a male without blemish, and he shall kill it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. And the priests, Aaron's son, shall sprinkle his blood round about upon the altar, and he shall cut it into his pieces with his head and his fat. And the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire which is upon the altar. But he shall wash the inwards and the legs with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it upon the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice and offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. I mean, I think it's
Now,
saying the same thing as the first. It doesn't talk about flaying it and things like that, but
so this is what I wrote down, and when we read it again, I do see it. I see it your way. What I wrote down is right after it says, "And the priest Aaron's son shall sprinkle his blood round about the altar, and he shall cut." To me, that he goes back to Aaron's sons, and everything that happens after the priest lay there shall lay, and he shall wash the inwards. I tied it all to the priest because when you read the first one, it doesn't read like that. When you read the first one, it says, and when you read the first one, this how it reads: "And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord. The priest Aaron shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood round about the altar.
mm-hmm.
That is by the door of the tabernacle of congregation. And he shall flay." Well, I guess you can read that the same way. You're right.
Yeah, I think it
I,
goes
I,
back
I
and
read
forth myself.
it does, but when you actually get down to the actual to the what you call it, the young pigeons or the turtle doves,
Yeah.
I again, the correlation I made there was that there was no killing. I mean, the priest actually does the killing. The priest wrings the neck. The priest pulls the feathers off, and the priest puts it on the altar. The person doesn't do any take part of anything other than providing that sacrifice. But you know what? I'm gonna go back because I read that wrong, I guess, and I got all these notes there. Another point that I made, in my notes is that in one place it talk about an offering being at the door of the tabernacle, which to me would say that was east, since the tabernacle pointed east, so the door would have been east, and then there was one that was northward, and then I believe there was one that was toward the west. Was Let me see. No, one was northward, and one was east, and one was westward. Right?
Well, it says before
No,
the door of the
the,
tabernacle, which
before the
would
door would be
be
west.
to the west. Is that all the way toward? And Is that all the way at the door of the tabernacle? Because it says at the door of the tabernacle. Then you have the laver there, right? And then
Hmm.
the altar. Or was it in the direction of the door of the tabernacle, meaning on the west side of the altar?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I mean, I'm gonna tell you something, man. Looking at my notes this far out, I did these notes 2, 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
so I apologize.
Well, I think that all of this is at the door of the tabernacle anyway. The altar and the laver are at the door of the tabernacle. I don't even know that they're directly in line with each other going to the door, like altar, laver, like the illustration that you sent us. I don't
Hmm.
know. It may be offset somewhat, and just giving room for the altar, but still between
Well,
them.
right here it says, "And he shall kill it on the side of the altar northward
Hmm.
before the Lord." And in another place, let me see. I'm gonna have to do this color coded next time.
I think you pointed out that the tabernacle faces the east.
Hmm.
So again, the first sacrifice, the bullock one, is before the tabernacle. So it's likely to be on the west side of the altar somewhere.
And in
I'm
chapters
still trying to get the picture in my head.
in verse 16 it said, and he shall oh, what am I doing? Hold on. And he shall let me get back. I'm sorry. He said, and he shall, and the priest shall bring it to the altar and wring off his head and burn it on the altar, and the blood thereof shall be wrung out by the side of the altar, and he shall pluck away his prop with his feathers and cast it beside the altar on the east part by the place of the ashes. So, you know, I think one thing, I don't know sure who mentioned this in one of the conversations, but it was saying to me that it's possible multiple things are happening at a time. Some things are happening on this side of the altar, some things are happening on that side of the altar, and not just one sacrifice. We do all this stuff, and then we wait on the next sacrifice. I guess I'm trying to understand, or trying to talk to the what are the priests doing throughout this time with these sacrifices? Like, what work are they doing? How much time is given to a sacrifice? You see what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
I can't imagine them standing waiting for all of these things to happen one by one, if that makes sense. And I guess that's what I was more looking at as I was trying to think through this.
Yeah, and I forget exactly how big the altar is, but it seems to me that it's like 3 cubits. Um, 3 cubits one way, 3 cubits the other way, which um is 4.5 feet. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
I think that's right, about 4.5 feet. And I may be wrong about the number of cubits it is too, but it is bigger than the other furniture that was there. I'm not sure how big the laver was, but it's bigger than the table and the for showbread and the ark and all that. Um, so there'd be room for more, I believe, than just one thing going on at the time. And I'm still, like I said, trying to get a picture in my head of what this really looked like, um, by reading. Yeah, it's very interesting. Let's see.
But those are the only things that I had that I had on the chapter one.
Okay. And before we run, I mean that last part with the bird, the pigeon. I got two things for this, but first, uh, to be completely serious with it, it could be understood that it goes back and forth. That the priests wring off the head, they wring out the blood, right? And then, but it does say he shall pluck away the crop. Could be the person doing the offering, because it goes back and says, and the priest shall burn it upon the altar. So for time constraints, the priest does one thing, goes to the next person perhaps, and is starting that sacrifice while the person is, you know, plucking the feathers and getting it, you know, it says here, divided asunder, not divided asunder, rather, cleave with the wings thereof, but not divided asunder. So he's preparing it, and then the priest comes back to continue that. Um, I think it could be read either way, and I wouldn't argue about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing was it says that the offering would be of two young pigeons, or of young pigeons, not two, but young pigeons, turtle doves, or of young pigeons. And just for those out there that have a conspiracy theory about pigeons being invented recently and stuff like that, and some kind of government program, there's pigeons way back in the Bible, so just chill out, believe the word. Side note.
That side note is funny. We was out in Atlanta. We had went to the aquarium, which was not great. I did not like the aquarium, but others have loved it. But we was out. We went to the Atlanta aquarium, and we saw these pigeons, and my daughter was like, "Pigeons are robots. They're not real." And she had that
Hilarious.
right. So, and me, I like to provide proof to the foolishness, and so I just looked up a baby pigeon, and baby pigeons do not look like adult pigeons at all, like zero.
Hmm.
You would not be able to look at an adult pigeon and a baby pigeon and knew that they were related. So just another fun fact. Sorry, let's
all
move
I
on.
gotta all I gotta say is growing up in Brooklyn, if pigeons are man made, the government has a lot of money. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. They
But let
got
me
a
tell you,
lot of money. They have an unlimited budget, which I guess you could argue that they really do.
yeah, they got a lot of money. But I don't. I guess Don, and I'm gonna read it again, and maybe we may venture back to this direction, but and just because I just can't read it while I'm trying to talk as well.
Sure.
But but what the thoughts that I initially had were that there are three sacrifices, and those three and really I actually believe that that chapters 1, 2, and possibly some of 3 are all talking about in a sense just this one main type of offering. You can bring a burnt offering. You can bring what was the next one? It was the you could bring a meat offering, and then lastly, I think it was you could bring a peace offering, and I think that's the way I took it, like that. It was just all these offerings, but they all just a general way of saying if you have this, you can bring this. If you have this, you can bring that. If you have this, the top, you bring it. That's the highest of all the sacrifices you could bring. If not, you got this. And as we go down the list, those things they to those who can't bring who couldn't bring for a love offering, so to speak. You know, those sacrifices got smaller and smaller and smaller. That's the way I took the first 3 chapters of the book, and so we gonna probably have to talk through that because that's exactly how I would be reading the book is that God made a way for everybody. I mean, God sees even. I guess what I would have been saying at the end is God sees even or accepts even the smallest of sacrifices, and this can be seen in the woman who brought the mite, right? And I think that this gets to that, like those who have the most means. It I guess the direction I was going, but now I might be wrong because I got to go back and look at this chapter again. But the direction I was going is that the in Christianity and in Israel and in all of God's kingdom, so to speak, you know, we shouldn't be like the world where we try to enrich ourselves. It's all about equality. It's all about making sure that we all are equal. So this great sacrifice for a rich person is still just a great sacrifice for a poor person. They were equal even though they didn't have the same circumstances. And I find that to be an important part of Christianity. I think that when we take on the world's idea of of what a Christian world looks like, we tend to, if we American, we tend to make it capitalism, and it's good to get as much as you can, and exceed, get to the top of that ladder. And I think that what we find in Leviticus, this is the point I'd have been going to if I was if I was if what my thoughts about Leviticus 1 was correct, 1, 2, and 3 were correct, would be that the Christianity shouldn't take on this idea of kill or be killed. The only the strong survive. It should be the strong helping the weak be just as strong. You know what I'm saying? And that is the motto here that I believe God is. I would have believed that God was speaking to as we see these offerings, change. But I could be totally wrong on that. Now I got to go back and look at chapter 1 once again to make sure that I hit that correctly.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that both of them participating in all three sacrifices in different ways would diminish from that thought at all either. Because it's still saying the same thing, like you said. And in another place, I forget what it is, but it's where it's talking about bringing the lamb, because very what you just said basically is having the means, but those that didn't have the means and were poorer, they would go to the pigeons or the turtle doves. I think it's specifically turtle doves in the chapter or the place I'm thinking of, and that's a lot of why people talk about Joseph and Mary being poor and Christ growing up in a poor, household, because they offered that sacrifice of turtle doves rather than a lamb in that particular instance. In the book of Luke, it talks about it. So, um, so yeah, I mean, I see your point there. I also see as just to point this out, throw it out there, that in the book of Exodus, it does talk about different offerings that would be given. Redeeming the firstling of the flock, or whatever, and it goes through different things, and it also talks about the redemption price, which is a half shekel of silver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And said everybody, everybody is given exactly that offering. Nobody's given anything different than that. Whatever exactly that was for, of course, it's used for the tabernacle. So whatever the meaning was, it's just everybody is contributing that exact same amount. And to your point, the idea of tithing would exactly fit that as well. Everybody had a responsibility under tithe to give that 10th%, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is, you know. And so the rich would give more, and the poor gave less, but it's all percentage wise, it's the same thing. So I think that all points to that same concept, and not to get into a big discussion or anything about tithing and all that, which some people have arguments about. Whatever you think, it was that way, you know. So
Just weight and balance.
Yeah, and another point that I saw here, another thing that came to mind as I read about talking to Don's point about him washing the inwards in the legs with the water, and Don asked what we thought about. I mean, if we had any thoughts there. I thought I had said this before, but this every time I read that, as I read through this a couple of times a few weeks ago, every time I read that, I thought about Elijah. I thought about Elijah on top of the mountain with the prophets of Baal, and him poking fun at them. And then when it came down to hit, now he let them sacrifice a dry offering, a dry sacrifice. Let's see what happens. But he goes in the midst of a drought, and he gets some water, and he throws that water on on the offer on the sacrifice.
mhm.
And and that this always reminds me of that thought, like the point of putting this water on the legs. Does that somehow, is that some on the washing the inwards and the legs with water, is that somehow embodied in what Elijah is doing on the top of the mountain there with those prophets of Baal? It may not be associated, but that's what comes to mind. And I always think those little nuggets sometimes mean. something, because the fact that they wash it, um, would make them damp and will make them a little bit harder to burn. So maybe God wants them to burn a little bit slower. Because then, at some point he says these are a sweet savor, like as if he wants it to take time. And, I think, you add water to it, it roasts or, I don't know. I'm not just talking out loud at that point, or is it that he needs to clean it for some other reasons? But I definitely thought about Elijah when I read through that. And I'm sorry I didn't answer that earlier when Don mentioned it.
That's okay. You did say that before another time, but uh, and this is just again thinking off the top of my head kind of thing. When it's of course it's supposed to be a sacrifice without blemish, without spot. It's supposed to be, you know, um, I I get the idea clean. If you take the inwards out, eh, they need to be cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, how in depth that cleaning was, and the same thing with the legs. The legs are separated. The legs would be the things touching the ground, right? The rest of the body's off the ground, not getting dirty or anything, so it's washing off perhaps the dirt. But that's just me again thinking out loud. Same thing. Um,
And the inwards would be dirty. I mean, the
yeah,
inwards. Was maybe being we talking about intestines and things like that.
Bile, blood,
Yeah,
mixture, all of that. Yeah.
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 So how
No,
much
no.
did they clean it? Is the other question. Like they wring out the blood of the turtle dove or the pigeon. Are they wringing out these inward parts as well to clean them off completely or what? But there's not those specific details in there. It's just wash the inwards, and maybe we'll
Where are they
see
getting
it later on
water? Where are they getting this water from in the desert?
out of the
I mean,
rock.
yeah, I guess you're right. They complaining about being thirsty, but yet they had this water that to wash these animals with at the same time, which is important. I mean, I mean, I'm not certain how much sacrifice. I don't know the answer to that question, but again, I'm always curious of how all of this worked. You know, uh, they I was going to make a statement about the burn off again, another statement, but I lost it. So let me just shut up. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like drinking water too. They're not far necessarily far from the Red Sea. It could be that they've got plenty of washing water of some sort. You know, but I don't know either. Other than that it's I would also say it's not like a desert, the wilderness that it talks about. It's over in the land of Midian, is where they're at, and at the foot of the mountain, there's probably some streams in different places. But yes, the the I think the question comes: how will we have water for all this people? It's like, there's a couple of streams here. We could wash some sacrifices, out, but how are we gonna everybody gonna drink? And then of course
Yeah.
that's supplied.
They they drunk them waters with the gold ground up in it, right?
Yep, that's
So
true. Just, there was that too. And then the waters at Mara, right, had to be purified to be made drinking water. So again, I think there's water, but it's just a different thing to ask about the clean drinking water that they could take.
another thought I had is about the smell that had to be around the camp at this point, right? I mean, anytime you throw something on a grill, right? And don't tell what kind of wood they were using. I mean, right now we use wood to flavor food. I'm not saying this is food, but I'm just what I'm saying is I think about what the Bible says is a sweet savor unto the Lord, right? I mean, all those things like what does that mean? We I think we read across that word a sweet savor unto the Lord, if I'm in the camp all day, you have this smell of grilled meat.
It's a
All
good smell. It's a good smell.
so you know what's the connotations there? Like when the children complaining about the children of Israel are out there complaining about not having anything to eat, but yet they are bringing these sacrifices for sin to the. All I'm saying is this: it is Leviticus is what God is telling them right now to do. Are they only able to execute this? And I guess we can go to Numbers to figure this out. Are they only able to execute this once they get into the land where they're going? Into the place where they're going and set up shop there, or are they doing this as they move from place to place, making these sacrifices with nothing to eat and no food and nothing to drink? I don't know, but I can imagine that the smell in that area had to be, it had to be I mean, a great smell, and so when I think about the Bible saying is of a sweet savor unto the Lord. Is it really talking about the smell, or is it talking about something else? And I don't know how to answer that question, but I wonder what that is. But anytime I think you put some on wood, but then at some point, and I'm taking it to the next step, it burnt the food. Or the offering. I keep saying food, but it burnt the offering, and a burnt steak stinks, right? So I'm not trying to sound irreverent here, and I'm not making, I'm not wanting to make this sound irreverent as we talk about these offerings. But at some point, something that starts off smelling, I think, good turns into something that smells, unfavorable. It is. What does that mean to this point? And I don't know, but
Didn't burnt offerings burn all day?
you know,
They burnt slowly, didn't they? I have to read through again, but it seemed like it was something that burned all day. And I know
I think
typically
that, yeah,
just from smoking meats, if you smoke something low and slow, it's gonna smell good the whole time.
well, I just don't believe they were smoking. I don't believe it was slow and low because they had to put more stuff on the altar.
That's
So,
true. And they were
and,
burning it. They weren't necessarily smoking it. Yeah.
and whatever they were doing on the altar, it was turning to ashes,
Mhm.
right? And they were
Yeah.
clearing ashes. Again, another question: how did they clear the ashes? If the fire always was going,
Well, they got a shovel that they made. That's all in the book of Exodus. All the little implements, fish hooks, and all this stuff. It's
Yeah.
it's very cool.
Maybe we should have
And
Exodus before we got Leviticus. But
well, and it does talk about the morning sacrifice and the evening sacrifice in the book of Exodus. And there's something I forget what it is that's the perpetual fire. I just don't remember, so I don't want to try to say it. We can try to look it up or something, but that's over in the book of Exodus also. But to your point, Darius, is like these instructions are being given. Are they actually doing it, or are they talking about something that's going to be done? They're going to maintain later on, or do they do it kind of uh, sometimes? I'm looking for the word, um, but not always. They're obviously not doing it as they're traveling because they don't have the tabernacle set up anyway. They're having to travel, so they're not able to do it at those times. And again, to the idea that this whole thing becomes corrupted or becomes neglected, and there's several different ways you can think of it. Just it happens, and it happens fast throughout their generations, where they just stop doing things and they leave off this stuff. Um, and 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 then it seems like God stops them from doing stuff as well. When they're doing it and all wrong, and his land doesn't get the Sabbaths. They think they're doing right things, but he said, "No, you're going into captivity, and my land is going to rest."
right,
So, but yeah, that's interesting because I hadn't thought about it as in chapter 1. They're not going ahead and doing this right now, so this is given as instruction, and we don't know whether or not they do it because, as you said, God is speaking throughout the whole book. At what point are they practicing it? Do we see them practicing it? Um, Not in the book of Leviticus, but
Well, we
somewhere
well we know
outside of it.
that Aaron's son Abihu
That's right. That's
and
right.
we know that they messed up, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and and we I guess
Strange fire.
yeah, and so but I don't know if but let me say this I don't know that that let me look this up real quick. I want to look it up real quick.
Hmm.
I still want to agree with what you're saying, Don, here because I I want to say that that at some point they had to practice. They had to figure out how to do these things. They had to write this stuff down. They had to read it and understand it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so I still want to agree with you, and maybe we get some insight to some of the things that happen and into the audience. They go another place in Leviticus 10 where God is not necessarily talking here, but for the most part, He is talking to in the book. But
Yeah. When they had Nadab and Abihu
yeah.
Yeah.
took either of them his censer, put fire therein, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out a fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord.
Hmm. What must that have been like? Just to see fire come down from God and just consume them. Like, yeah, get them up out of here.
I'm gonna tell you in some ways in my life, and I'm just being honest with you, and you know, I would have. I mean, I know, knowing Christ now and understanding the way what we understand about Christ now is, really what every Old Testament saint looked forward to. But to be in the wilderness to see God in action, man, I'm trying to tell you. To me, it would provide so much. We literally live by faith. I mean, we have to believe what we say to be true, or or as Paul said, we of all men are most miserable because we don't have any external things to say, you know, this or that way outside of what we believe the scriptures teach us. And so, you know, and what we yearn for is for our faith to be sight. What song is that? What song is that song? And when Christ shall descend, and how does it go? When Christ shall descend, and
You talking about it
it
as well with my soul? I mean,
is
that's
well with my soul. But what's the last stanza?
the face shall be made sight is the part of that, or my face shall be made sight.
Yeah. But the lyrics of it say, let me see. Let me see. Let me get the lyrics. But the last it says, hold up. These
Now,
people.
there's some other songs that say something similar too. That might not be that one. What is the song? And Lord haste the day,
Sorry.
and Lord haste the day when the face shall be made sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, the Lord shall descend. Even so it is well with my soul. There's
Right.
that.
But the point is that I think we are we want our faith to become sight at some point, and but their faith was in sight. You know what I'm saying? They literally walked out onto a dry ground. They Moses is standing there, and whether they hear God or not, they see His glory filling the temple. I mean the tabernacle. You know what I'm saying? These things are just I find that when the Bible say "woe unto them," it really means it, man. Because these people, these Hebrew people, get to see God's glory, in the same way that the children of Israel get to see Jesus walking in the flesh. I mean, it's just those moments are some of the, to me, if you can't have faith in those moments, then there is no hope, you know. So
Mm.
seeing this fire come down and burn them up, I bet, and we know this to be true. Every priest got it right from that point until the death of Moses. You know,
Right.
come on.
And that goes back to what I said. A
Single
lot of
minded.
people a lot of people looking well in that moment, even if they had the inclination that, yeah, I don't know if I'm rocking with Moses and Aaron and his sons, and then they see something like this happen, it's like, oh, wait a minute, nah, my bad, nah, I believe it.
But this also goes to tell you that, you know, of what kind of people this is, right? Like why Moses, the meekest man on the planet, is frustrated because after even seeing that stuff, I mean, what I'm saying is God saving Israel is a common occurrence because they got so
Mm.
used to it that they don't care no more. And
Yeah, and you get what I forget the name now, but that the crowd that came and they were like, we're doing these things too. Why Moses? Why Aaron? You know what I'm talking about? And the earth opens up to take them down. I
Sons
forget.
of Korah,
Yeah, the sons of
wasn't it
Korah.
the sons of Korah?
So this is over and over. And I, depending on where we see Leviticus chapter number 10 in the history of it, when did that happen? When did the sons of Korah happen? This is happening over and over again. It's amazing that it keeps happening. That's what you get when you read through the book of Judges. It's like they went into captivity, they were delivered out of captivity, then they sinned against God again and went into captivity again. Forgot the Lord, went into captivity again. And just it's like, when are you going to learn? It's like, but
I'm
but
humbled by these occurrences because I see myself.
exactly.
yes, I
And I think, when am I going to learn?
That's
Like, how many
exactly
times is
right.
this going to happen? When am I going to learn?
Hmm. Exactly.
I don't,
They're
I
written
no
for
longer
our
see myself
example
as
so that we can
right,
learn from it. And
right.
when are we going to learn?
I always say I used to see myself as the hero of the story. Me and Ezekiel were talking, and I said, and I got saved. I was so pious in my stance. I saw myself as David killing Goliath. Little did I know, I'm David sleeping with Bathsheba and killing her husband. It's like, because we all want to see now, and that's not to discourage anybody. You can walk with God and walk with God faithfully, but it is humbling looking at this stuff when you go to come down on these people looking back, like, how could David do this? And then you're like, well, what about your sin last week? What
Hmm.
about your sin today? You knew this was wrong and you still said it and you still did it. What about that? And it's like, yeah, I kind of understand what happened here. I
Yeah.
get it.
Mm.
before we go, I'm still here, y'all. I'm trying to, before we go, I still want to point out that fact. I want to be able to come back to this issue about how how the order of operation for the burnt offering, and um um. So when next week when we come back, if we could come back here, I would love to hit that part one more time because um
Order.
yeah, when we get it,
Okay.
but when I want to move on. That was all I had. I mean, I'm still willing to talk more about this, but I talked about the wood a little bit in my notes. I asked like, what kind of wood was it? Did it have to be the same kind of wood every time? It doesn't tell us that. Just another one of those little thoughts I had in my notes.
Okay. And just we did mention it, but to quote this commentary real quick, it must be a male. The burnt offering must be a male representing the second Adam without blemish. And he goes on to talk about some stuff about being without blemish and the significance of the wording. And he also mentions that that's not the same as the peace offering, which is chapter 3, I think it gets into it, where it says it can be a male or a female. It's specifically a male in chapter 1 for the burnt offering. and and he mentions in there that the type is different. That the peace offering is not the same type as the burnt offering. But of course, we can elaborate later on.
But I don't. For some reason, I don't see this particular offering as a necessarily a representation of Christ, right? Um, as I would see some of the other sacrifices that include the burnt offering. I see this offering as literally a offering of pure. I mean, coming straight from the person's own joy and heart of the Lord. The thing I question, I got in my notes that I question is he puts his hands on the head of the burnt offering. Why? And that may imply that he's transferring some guilt there, but I don't know that to be the case here. I asked myself what was the reason for that, because I don't know that it's a transferring of guilt um, in this situation.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
it doesn't necessarily say what that represents right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just mentions it. Man, I found as while I'm reading my Bible, sometimes when things are something is just dropped and doesn't really explain, somewhere later on it goes into detail. And it's been so long since I've read through Leviticus that I don't know if there's any more detail given to that point right there, or if that's just dropped in there and moved on.
Yeah. I
So
don't think
any more thoughts through
I don't think I have anything else in the first chapter, and we have to study up for chapter 2.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to do some studying. We can read chapter 2 if you want. I don't know if you want to read chapter 2 or just leave that for next time, and then we can read that when we start and kind of start going over that.
Either way, what do you think,
All right, we'll
Darius?
do that. We'll leave it. We'll leave it for next time. Won't put too much on a plate right now.
All right.
Plate, all pun intended. Darius stuff in his face.
All right. So we just need your closing, Brother Carleaf.
Well, I think I will close with the statement made by Brother Thomas, and I think it is very apropos for what we did today in going through the scripture. Let the scripture speak for itself. I know I have a tendency to do this, and I know most of us do. We read the Bible and we want to read into it. And at times, the Bible does have more exposition left, right? More things to be drawn out. But at times we need to stick with the clear text. What does it say? We may figure out later on that this means more, but don't try to make the Bible say something it doesn't say, because in doing that, you get into a lot of trouble. And I'll end with that. Hopefully, you got something good from that one. And as I stated in closing, read your Bible, read the Bible for what it says, use the Bible to interpret the Bible. Sometimes we get a little carried away in our interpretations when it comes to typology, and sometimes we look too deeply into stuff and sometimes we don't look deep enough, as I already said. Anyway, y'all know what it is. Stay frosty, people.